Thrive students, I wanted to welcome you guys to the third installment in our dating series called Swipe Right. Week 3, we'll be talking about dating. So the first sermon was about manhood. The second one was about womanhood. If you missed those, you can go back on our YouTube channel and watch those. This week, we will be talking about dating. So to give you guys a understanding of where we're at, we're going to be in the Song of Solomon, which is a biblical book that's just talking about the relationship between Solomon and a woman that he married. You also see their friends in there. It's kind of a conversation. It's basically their love story, right? Solomon wrote down their love story and when they were dating and how that moved into engagement and eventually marriage. Just a heads up for you, if you decide to go read this biblical book, it can be really sexually explicit. And so just be prepared for that. A lot of times in Jewish society, they wouldn't let young men read this book until they were adults because they were scared that the imagery was just a little too sexual for them. So just be warned on that it is something that you need to pay attention to when you read it. Also, a lot of the information in this sermon is taken from a book by Matt Chandler called The Mingling of Souls. So if you want a little more information about this or anything, that's a great resource to check out. Or if it sounds familiar as you're reading that book, that's why. So I also wanted to share with you guys as an intro to this, I thought it would be really cool to get some advice from the older people in our congregation for dating. And so this is what they had to say this morning at church and giving you guys some advice for dating. The Grouse, Mary said, be honest with your morals and virtues. And she was explaining to me what she means by this was just don't change who you are for the person that you're dating. You should be able to be 100% who you are with them. Dick said, be yourself, be open, be honest, and be caring. Um, the DeFords, I love this. Ryan said, guys, be gentlemen. Girls, let them. I love that advice. That's so true. Then Lori DeFord said, take Jesus with you. And she told this really funny story about when her daughter went on a date with a guy. She remembered walking out to the car and saying, I want you guys to remember that the Lord is with you as you're on this date. And she didn't mean that in a mean way or anything, but she was just saying, like, be aware that God goes with you everywhere. And she said she actually took a Bible and put it between them in the car and then jokingly said, we never had an issue with them on that date, which I thought was so funny. I just thought I would share it with you guys because she's right. We do take Jesus with us wherever we go, maybe especially when we're dating. And then the Bolins, I love what they had to say. She said, marry someone who's a Christian, which is so true because the Bible calls us not to be unequally yoked if we're following Jesus. And then Russ said, men, respect your girlfriend. And that's so true. To treat people with respect, the person that you're dating, whether that's physically or spiritually or with your words, that's really great advice. And so I want to catch you guys up a little bit before we launch into this about where we are in the Song of Solomon. And so every relationship, when it comes to dating, a healthy relationship anyway, should have kind of this natural progression. So it starts out with attraction, where guys or ladies, you notice someone across the room. Guys, you notice this girl and you think to yourself, she's pretty foxy and she seems fun. She's someone that I would love to hang out with more. And so there's that initial attraction, and then you start hanging out with them in a group of friends and you kind of find out about their character, you find out what kind of person they are. And that moves eventually into this word reciprocity, which basically means that there's a give and take in the relationship. It's not all one person. The guy really likes her, the girl really likes him. And then that moves into something that's really life-giving. Both of them flourish in their relationship with Jesus because of the other one. And so we catch this relationship. I didn't want to start at the very beginning just for time's sake. And so we catch this relationship kind of right after character, right? There's been this initial attraction. They've kind of hung out together a little bit, and she's seen Solomon's character. And so we catch them right between where they know about each other's character and they're trying to get to this place where they figure out that they like each other. And I love how this goes. She says in Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 7, she says, tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon, for why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? We put this in everyday speak now. She's saying, where are you going to be Friday night? Are you working at the BK? Because if you're working at the BK, I'm going to stop by and buy me a Whopper. Wherever you're going to be, I want to be there. And I love his response to her because he's just as flirty back with her. He says, if you don't know, oh, most beautiful woman, follow the trail of my flock and graze your young goats by the shepherd's tents. And so he's flirting back with her. He says, follow the trail, right? He's saying, I will be there and I will value size your meal if you show up at the BK while I'm working, baby girl. And I just think that's so funny that there's this very obvious flirting, right? She's flirting with him, he's flirting back. She's like, where are you going to be? He's like, I'm going to be there and I would love it if you show up, right? In a very funny kind of way. And then their friends, um, talk about that here in a little bit. We'll talk about what their friends think of that. I love what happens in this next verse because he responds to her. He says, he follows up in the next verse by saying, I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. And so let me say two things. Number one, this is a really great compliment for him to give her. You'll see why in a minute. But number two, guys, do not go to a girl and drop the pickup line that she looks like a horse. It will not go well for you. Do not drop that pickup line. It is not a drag and drop pickup line for the girls in your life. But the reason this was such a great compliment in their time is because Pharaoh only used white Arabian horses. And so if you know anything, I put this picture on here to kind of show you guys why this was such a compliment. If you drive by a herd of horses, they all kind of mix together, right? They're brown and black, but the white ones always stand out. And that's what he's saying. He's saying in a very subtle way, he's saying, there's all these girls out there, but you are the only one that I notice, right? He's saying, you're the only one that I see, and you are the only one that I notice. These horses were expensive, and they were one of a kind. And so he's paying her a really sweet compliment. But guys, don't go telling a girl that she looks like Pharaoh's horses, at least not today. All right. And I love how their friends respond to their relationship. Their friends say, we will make for you ornaments of gold studded with silver. And so basically their friends are saying, man, we love what we're seeing. Your relationship is going well. You guys are both doing good. I feel like it's good for both of you. And so that's not always the case. If you ever had friends that started dating and then they suddenly fell off the map or the face of the earth, that's not a good thing, right? Or if your friends really dislike the person that you're dating, usually that's a red flag sign that they're not someone that you should be dating. To my shame, in high school, I wasn't a Christian then, but that doesn't make it okay. The girl that I was dating, my friends really didn't like her. I dated her for a really long time, and I just mistreated my friends. A lot of times I would have scheduled to hang out with my friends, and then if she had free time, I would just ditch my friends and go hang out with her. And so it was obvious to see why my friends didn't like her. And so if that's happening in a relationship with you, if you're dating someone and your friends really don't like her, or your parents really don't like her, as much as you don't like to hear it, it's probably a red flag and not someone that you should be dating. All right, and then we'll move to the next couple of verses and hear what she has to say. So she says, while the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-gedi. And so, guys, this sounds really explicit. She doesn't mean it as explicitly as it sounds. Now, a little bit later in this letter, they do get really explicit and they mean to be explicit, but this isn't as explicit as it might come off to us. Basically, she's saying, I'm laying on my couch at home and I'm thinking about him, and he's laying on his couch at his house, and he is thinking about me. Think like sending flirty texts back and forth, right? She knows that he's thinking of her, and he knows that she's thinking of him. There's this reciprocity, right? Nobody's carrying the relationship. If you're ever in a relationship where it seems like you're the only one that ever texts, you're the only one that ever calls, or if you never want to call the person that you're dating, or if you really could take it or leave it, whether you spend time with them, guys, that's not a healthy dating relationship. And so you need to take that as a sign, as a red flag, and probably step out of that relationship because it probably isn't very healthy. But in this relationship, there's reciprocity. They're both thinking about each other. And so it's a good thing. And that pushes into this next verse that we'll see, guys, where she says, behold, you are beautiful, my beloved, truly delightful. Our couch is green. The beams of our house are cedar. Our rafters are pine. And so if you're wondering to yourself, what in the world does that mean? What kind of house has a green couch and beams that are made out of cedar and pine rafters? They're not saying they have a really great log cabin. They are outside, right? She is saying that they are protecting their purity. When they're hanging out, they're doing it in public, right? They're doing it where other people can see them. And they're doing that because they want to protect their purity. And we'll see why that's important here in a couple of verses. I'll talk a little more about that, guys. But they refuse to be alone in a place that could put them in a compromising position. Romans 13 puts it like this. It says, because we belong to the day, we must live decent lives for all to see. Don't participate in the darkness of wild parties and drunkenness, or in sexual promiscuity and immoral living, or in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, clothe yourself with the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, and don't let yourself think about ways to indulge your evil desires. And so, to put just some practicality on this, one thing that you shouldn't be doing, this might sound a little left field to you guys, but it's a piece of advice that I got when we were dating. And honestly, it's super sound, right? Because especially when you're dating after high school, when you're off living on your own, a lot of times, even if you're a Christian, the thing you do, you go out to dinner and they're like, well, what do you want to do? Let's just go back to your house and watch a movie. This is not a great idea. And this is what they're saying in this verse. It's not a great idea to be alone somewhere without anybody nearby, because it's just opening up an opportunity for something to happen. And so I know a lot of couples who will say, we hang out alone, but we usually do it in public, because we know if we go back to our house and hang out, or we go back to my house and we hang out on the couch, just the two of us in the dark, watching a movie, cuddled up, something's going to happen that shouldn't happen. And so that's a really practical way, even though that sounds a little crazy in our culture, it's something that you need to do if you want to protect your purity. I'm not saying you can't ever hang out alone, but you have to keep your head on straight when you do it. You'll see why here in a little bit. I love what she says next. She says, as an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. With great delight I sat in his shadow, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. And so, ladies, this is a good compliment to give a guy, to tell him he's a big, strong tree. That's a pretty good compliment, right? I would take that from my wife. But what she's saying is that she feels safe with him, right? She feels like she can relax around him. There's a safety from him, and there's a safety from the people around her that she feels when she's with him. She feels protected. And so, guys, ladies should feel safe when they're with you, especially if they're dating you. They shouldn't be worrying about abuse or about you being pushy physically or with your words. They should always feel protected. Now, ladies, guys aren't going to be perfect. You know that. But if a guy makes you feel unsafe, if he ever at any point abuses you or does something spiritually or physically that makes you feel unsafe, or uses his words to make you feel unsafe, that's a relationship that you need to get out of, because that's not a good, godly relationship. And then we also see that she says, he brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. And so what does she say? She says, he brought me to the banqueting house. He's taking me out to dinner, right? He's taking her out, and he's proud of her. His banner over her is love. Everybody knows how he feels about her. He's not talking about her like as a trophy. He's not showing her off like a trophy. He's saying, I'm crazy about this girl, and she's crazy about me. And he wants everybody to know it. He's proud of her. Another thing this is saying is he's the same guy in public as he is in private. And so what I mean is, I don't know if any of you have ever dated someone that was really great to you when you're in private. They were really affectionate and nice and kind. And then as soon as you got in public around their friends, they completely changed, and they would cut you down. They would be unkind, or they would just outright ignore you. Guys, that's not what this guy's doing. And that's not what a healthy relationship does. If you're dating someone that does that, whether it's a guy or a girl, it's just not a healthy relationship. And you either need to call it out so that things change, or point it out, or maybe it's a relationship that you shouldn't be in. So I just wanted to call that out to you guys so that you could see it. This next verse, she says, sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. So guys, I don't want to be crass here, but I do want to say what the scripture says. So raisins and apples are, back then, Jewish people considered those an aphrodisiac. If you don't know what that is, I don't know if you should go Google it. You might ask your parents what an aphrodisiac is. Basically, it's something that makes you sexually aroused, right? And that's what she's saying. She's saying that the guy that she's dating, that she feels a sexual, physical attraction to him. And that's not a bad thing, but it is something that you need to know and understand and keep an eye on. And that's part of why she said in the last couple verses where they talked about their purity, because she understands this. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of times in Christian circles, sex kind of gets beat down as this terrible thing. Like it's a bad thing. Sex is a good gift from a good God, but it needs to be in the right place. And so let me put this into perspective for you. So if a young guy came to me and he said, Dan, like I'm dating this girl and I'm crazy about her, but I feel some serious physical attraction to her. And I keep praying to God to take this attraction away and he's not doing it. What am I supposed to do? My response would be, well, of course he's not going to take that attraction away, because that attraction, that desire, that physical desire is a good thing. That's a God-given desire to be sexually attracted to someone. That's a God-given desire, and it's a good desire. You shouldn't be praying for God to take that away, because you really don't want him to take it away once you get married. Once you get married, that's a great desire. What you should be praying for is self-control, strength, and wisdom, that you wouldn't take advantage of those desires until it's the right time. And we'll see what she has to say about that in this next verse, in verse 7. She says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. You'll see this as a refrain throughout the letter. If you go through and read the rest of the letter, she says, do not awaken love until it so desires. That's how it's put in another translation. I wanted you guys to look at this and understand where she's coming from and understand why they take such a strong stance and why we as Christians take such a strong stance on sexuality and when it should be practiced. And so I wanted you guys to look at this because I realized this the other day after somebody pointed out to me, and it was just super helpful, right? So Samson, we can all agree that physically he was the strongest guy in the Bible, maybe the strongest guy that ever lived. He was dismantled by sexual sin. David, maybe one of the godliest men that ever lived, other than Jesus and maybe a couple other people, he was dismantled by sexual sin. Solomon, the guy writing this letter, was the wisest man to ever live. And you'll see if you follow his life story that later in life he was dismantled by sexual sin and ended up walking away from God because of the many wives that he had. And so if the strongest, the godliest, and the wisest people to ever walk the earth were dismantled by sexual sin, then we need to be humble enough to admit that if it burned them, then it's going to burn us if we don't look at it and treat it in the right way. And so I wanted you guys to think like this. Sex is a good thing, guys. Sex is a God-given gift. I've already kind of said that in this sermon, but I wanted you to think of it like this. Sex is powerful and it's good like fire, right? It's good when it's in the right boundaries. And so I wanted you guys to think of a campfire. That's why I put this picture on here. So campfire, when you go camping, is amazing. You got it in your fire ring. You cook food over it. You get heat from it. It's kind of that place where you go as a community to hang out. It's just a wonderful thing when it's in that ring, or a fire in a fireplace. As long as it's in that fireplace, it's a great thing. You really enjoy it. And that's what sex is like inside of marriage. It's a really good thing. That's a God-given gift that we're meant to enjoy. But if sex is like fire and it's not kept in the proper boundaries, now if you take that fire out of the fireplace and put it somewhere else in your house, you can burn your house to the ground. Or you're going to start a forest fire if you do it in the forest and burn the entire forest to the ground. And that's why, as Christians, we put such a heavy emphasis on sex inside of marriage, because it's such a powerful and good God-given gift. But if we use it in the wrong way or at the wrong time or take advantage of it in that way, it can destroy us or destroy other people or hurt them. And so I love how Paul puts this to Timothy in 1 Timothy when he's given some advice to Tim about how to treat women. He says in 1 Timothy 5:2, treat older women as you would your mother, and treat younger women with all purity as you would your own sisters. And so, guys, as unpopular as this is, if you're dating a girl, you need to treat her as if she's a sister in Christ. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to be attracted to her. None of us would be attracted to our sister. But he is saying that you need to treat her with purity. You need to treat her the way that you would want someone to treat your little sister. You need to treat her with respect. You need to protect her, even if sometimes that means protecting her from yourself. One other thing I wanted to point out before we finish this up, guys, another dangerous thing about sex outside of marriage is they can make us feel way closer than we actually are. Because God, when He created sin, He created it to bring two married people together and make them one person, right? And so if we do that outside of marriage, we don't have the character, we don't have the spiritual or the relational equity to back that up. So we feel way closer than we actually are. I kind of compare it to, if you've ever seen those gym fail videos on YouTube where some guy walks into the gym and thinks he's super strong and huge, and he goes up to a squat rack and it's got all this massive amount of weight on there. And he gets in there and he does all these yells and stuff, and then he backs up, and as soon as he backs up, he drops the weight and gets crushed underneath it. That's kind of what happens, right? Sex makes you feel like you have all this strength in your relationship, but it's phony. It's not real. And so that's another reason why why Christians, biblically, and why God Himself pushes you to keep sex in the correct relationship and in the correct place, because He cares about you. Lastly, I want you guys to remember, if you take anything away from this, it's that dating is about getting to know the person you're with. You can see that if you go back through these verses. As I was doing some research for this sermon, somebody pointed out really well. They said, you know, a lot of dating and eventually marriage, you spend most of your time just hanging out, whether that's hanging out. Once you're married, I spend most of my time hanging out with my wife, whether that's hanging out with our kids, hanging out at home, hanging out at church, or at lunch somewhere. And so when you're dating, you're trying to figure out, is this somebody that I could hang out with for the next 50 years, right? You're asking, is this somebody that I could spend time with all the time? And that's what dating is about. It's getting to understand someone's character, whether this is someone that's good for you to be around, whether this is someone that causes you to flourish in your relationship with Jesus. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I really enjoyed putting it together for you.